We are very, very privileged to have Professor Gerald Steinberg here with us tonight. Gerald is, by training, a physicist and also a political scientist who was doing all kinds of things that normal people do until Durban came along. And I'm sure he will tell you more about what happened, but he was so disgusted by the disgraceful attacks on Israel that he set up NGO Monitor. And NGO Monitor is a wonderful organization that monitors the activity and the funding sources of NGOs whose sole raison d'etre is to undermine and attack Israel.
Vladimir, thank you, and the Center for Jewish Life. I'm going to try to present the work that we do in the broader context. NGOs are non-governmental organizations, and frankly, in London, I think that it's the place in the world where one has to least talk about these. Amnesty International, Oxfam, War on Want, Medical Aid for Palestinians, the list goes on, Christian Aid, the list goes on. And I will show you how these organizations, charities, all of these organizations, and the ones in the UK are defined as charities, and in the United States they have slightly different definitions. They're regulated, and they are supposed to be doing humanitarian work. Their statutory requirements are very specific about not being involved in political campaigns. I'm going to talk to you about the political campaigns in the worst sense of the word. I'm going to just give you some examples of anti-Semitism within the NGO world. The first poster is an Oxfam poster. It's about 10 years old. It was distributed, that one I think that was distributed in France and Belgium and other countries. And the second one is a poster from Badil. That's a Palestinian organism. The Oxfam poster is the one with the blood orange. It's the blood libel, the blood theme. And at the bottom, it's a little bit too small, but it says, don't visit Israel, don't buy Israeli products, all of those things. The middle poster is from Badil, which is a very large, powerful Palestinian. It's the Right of Return, of the Palestinian Refugee Organization. The third is a Christmas card. And as I recall, it's sold every year by Amos Trust, another prominent British, maybe not quite as prominent as War on Want. They may have also been sold by War on Want. So these are just some of the illustrations. These are not new. These have been going on for up to, I think, as I said, Oxfam 10 years ago. The other one's somewhat more recent. The Charity Commission has declined to take action against them. These are things that come up over and over again. The anti-Semitism is also illustrated by some of the people involved in this. First one is three Jewish MPs that he talks about in there, ordered a round of B-52s. He was reprimanded, slapped on the fingers, not even on the wrist, for anti-Semitism, and then restored back to his position. And then this is another tweet that was less than a year ago, and he talks about Israeli war crimes and tangible steps for of Israeli accountability. That's his agenda. War on Want you also know about. It's prominent. I didn't realize we had all these slides here on anti-Semitism. Take a step back and look at this. We're not talking about just individual NGOs. This is a massive industry. The NGO industry in and of itself in Europe has a budget of at least 2 billion euros a year. I won't do the math. You can do the math on the currency conversion, but that's a lot of money. Nobody really knows where the money goes. Nobody's required to account for the spending, because they're giving to charities. They're giving to non-governmental organizations that do good things. And that's the challenge that we have to face. Christian Aid, I talked a minute ago about Badil. Another one of their partners is an organization called Zochrot. Zochrot is a 1948 NGO that Israel was created in sin. It's an Israeli NGO. They created an app called iNakba. They run conferences. A lot of what NGOs do, I'm not talking now about Amnesty or Oxfam or War on Want. There are hundreds of organizations that consist of a handful of people, including Breaking the Silence, by the way. It's a great way to make a lot of money. It's a great way to get a stage and be prominent, to get your name in the papers. All of these things together. There's some of your taxpayer money through the Department for International Development, DFID, goes to an organization called Islamic Relief Worldwide, IRW. And they have a budget of millions of pounds a year. They're based in London, from at least a dozen different European governments, and I'm believe the United States. I'm not sure now whether the U.S. is involved or not, but we know that they publish many of these groups publish their annual budgets and their income, and they let you know. We asked all of the government funders of IRW, we sent a formal letter, NGO Monitor sent a letter saying, has your government taken this information into account? What is the response of your government to this? And essentially we got the responses where, this was from the EU, we got, I think, a similar response from DFID, or maybe exactly the same language. The Commission does not provide global funding to NGOs and support specific projects. So if they're doing terrorism, that's what it implies. It's not our money. It's not our fault because we only give it to these projects. And then the second, we are not aware of anything which would suggest IRW is not in good standing. We are not aware. Okay, that's as far as they go. Norwegian Refugee Council is a multi-million-dollar organization. Annual budgets of, I think, probably at least 10 to 15 million. They provide information, counseling, and legal assistance. This is for protection and justice to Palestinians, 4 million euros and 5.5 million pounds to exactly the same project. So we asked, where does the money actually go? What do you do with this money? And the answer is somewhere between we don't know and we're not allowed to tell you. Now we know that the money goes for legal cases. Part of it goes for public relations every time there's a lawsuit. We know that through this money, the money goes to NGOs, the same NGOs I was talking about, for legal cases against Israel, Israelis. We know that some of the money goes to Al-Haq, which is a primary primary NGO rather, the Palestinian NGO that provides massive tomes of what they call evidence to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, alleging Israeli war crimes. I talked a little bit about Al-Haq, the leading organization that submits its documentation to the International Criminal Court in The Hague on a regular basis. This is where the money goes. And it's not just no value for the money on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's also doing a lot of damage to Israel, and I think to the cause of human rights. I talked a little bit about the Norwegian Refugee Council. Here's some of the details. Again, this is some of where the money goes. This is a form of it. One of the goals is to disrupt the Israeli judicial system, to create a blockage, and this is where the money is going to play this game. International action to combat the impunity employed by Israel. That's where some of this money is going. The Lancet is certainly in the UK and in much of the world considered to be the most prestigious medical journal in the world. And they published we tracked it, over 200 articles, supposedly peer-reviewed, although it turns out that they had shortcuts to that, primarily by authors from Medical Aid for Palestinians, propaganda against Israel's causing A, B, C, and D, causing birth defects. The high point of this was back in July of 2014 during the war, in which they published an open letter to the people of Gaza on the first inside page of the Lancet, which had really hostile language towards Israel. And of course, no mention of Hamas, terrorism or attacks with missiles or anything else. Just a couple words about Europe. We have a group of we have 25 people working in NGO Monitor. There is nobody else, and I'm not here to raise money. I'm telling you what we do, because I think it is something that is unique. We do research. We don't organize demonstrations. And 20 out of our 25 employees are researchers. And we did a sketch for the European Union. DFID it's pretty much in the UK, it's one organization. This is just a picture of the structure of funding. Hundreds of millions of euros a year. Each one of these groups has a much bigger framework. And they don't communicate with each other. They are often what we call double dipping. The same organization will get funding from 2 or more of these frameworks, and there's no coordination. Again, this is not about Brexit. This is about the degree to which this concept of funding non-governmental organizations, that's even the English term is oxymoron. What does our organization do, and how are we promoting this? Removing the NGO halo effect, they're not beyond criticism. And when Jake Wallace-Simon and the Telegraph, originally now with the Daily Mail, writes a piece about the medical aid for Palestinians and the anti-Semitism in the Lancet, that's a big deal. That has an impact. And in a number of other cases, challenging them. also with respect to Amnesty and other organizations, they are forced to defend themselves. And that makes a difference. And I think we have brought about together, some of the work of UK Lawyers for Israel and other organizations have brought about a change where a lot of the organizations now have to seriously consider what happens when they are criticized, and they have to put some resources in there. Changing the discourse about NGOs, uncovering contradictions, hypocrisy, and also including in that the NGO funders enablers. If you give money to an organization which acts immorally and in a manner which is inconsistent with your charter, with your agenda, with your commitments to the Charity Commission, then that in itself, if you're funding it, means that you're complicit in the process. And that's a difficult theme to push, because these organizations, private and public, but particularly public, we're doing God's work, we're doing wonderful things. How can you accuse us of this kind of activity? And this is something that has to continue to be done. And we have a set of guidelines and moral standards that we have published, how these issues should be dealt with if you're a serious organization. This is our website, and you're all welcome to use it. We list about 200 organizations on there, plus all of the funders, 2 different databases, which Sean and others are constantly updating. All right, that's it. That's the, we promised questions afterwards.
And therefore, on that note, again, thank you very much, Professor, for inspiring us, the little voice that we have, just to say those words, to say to yourself, what difference can I make? But let us, most importantly, we have the truth, but we need the courage to proclaim that truth. So thank you very much for coming in tonight.